Thank you very much, dear colleagues and friends. Frankly, I'm an academic, and my intention here was to first intention was to make an academic report. But having listened to the previous presentations, I decided to change my presentation a little bit. And the way I'm going to change it is this. Well, the speech about conservatives and liberals and contradictions between them and Russia. Well, I believe in Russia. All the best Russian thinkers like Pushkin, Solovyov, Chicherin, Stolypin, they were both liberals and conservatives. The idea of liberal conservatism, strange as it may seem, was first came from, but before that, Sergei, I agree with Sergei Mitrokhin that, well, of course, freedom was imported by Russia, and imported to Russia on several occasions, because we got freedom, lost freedom. But a powerful surge was during the Peter the Great's time. It may sound strange for our Western colleagues, but Peter the Great ordered the famous book by John Locke, translated to Russia, and he ordered everybody doing internal policy to work according to Locke's principle. And then he allowed a tolerance for religious beliefs, etc., etc. That was a first step. And well, our guest from the UK, and UK is the most liberal and the most conservative country at the same time. And in that country, well, there's no contradiction between the two. But the question is, what does conservatism rely on? And this is a very important matter. Well, liberalism is quite clear. Liberalism is freedom, and freedom is against abuse, against superimposing one's will upon other people. In Russia, well, the authorities would abuse their power, the population would suffer, would seek freedom, would sometimes revolt against the authorities. That's how it happened in Russia. But, well, to maintain balance between liberalism and conservatism, very difficult in Russia. And even the first Duma, the pre-revolution Duma, the people who were selected by the people thought the people selected them, elected them, so they could do anything. And the objective was, and the objective realized by Stolypin, well, imposing that idea that there's law which reigns supreme over any person. No politician be able to cross that line. In Russia, an attempt to comply with the law. Well, that was strange, and because Russia does not respect law. Although I love Europe, and some time ago, well, I put forward that notion of a Russian European. I may say that Europe itself in the 20th century showed that it did not comply with the basic principle of European countries, that is based in ancient Greece and Christianity. During the Nazi times, strange as it may seem, Russian Europeans, they were expelled from the Soviet Russia. They stood by those basic values of Europe. Georgy Fedotov wrote, "We are alone in this world in times of inequality. What do we rely on? We rely on the fact that the voice of freedom and equality continues to be there." Is it conservatism? Yes. Is it liberalism? Yes. In Russia, we had that tragic figure, Pyotr Stolypin. There's mixed reaction to what he did. But he proposed a very important thing. He started, implemented that thing, but there was so much opposition from the reactionary forces, from the emperor himself, from Bolsheviks. Everybody seemed to be against him, even the liberals. But what he wanted to do, first, he suppressed the revolt of 1905, and that was a revolt where many people were killed, intelligentsia, the wealthier people, while he wrote, I don't know what to do, I cannot stop it. But he managed to stop that revolt. But after that, he made a very important proposal. He required very important action to be done by Russia and Russian government. And I have to explain here, the Russian people of Russia, not upper circles, never had the right of ownership. Historically, no property with Russian people. At some point in time, even the ruling elite did not have any property. Well, after the Mongol yoke, the right to own land was restored. But then it was in the hands of tsars. And only after Yekaterina's time, people started having this right to own land. And what Stolypin wrote, that without property, people have nothing to defend. What are the values people are going to rely on? There were no values to rely on. So his idea to destroy what was before him and to give property to people, the property of land to peasants, that was something that could be an important foundation for future development. Why was it important to do? In Russia, there's a myth that people, the nation knows it all. The people carry the ideal of God. But it didn't work out really. At that point in time, an important thing happened. Sects, Christian sects, became stronger than Orthodox Christianity, but they were better structured. Nicholas II, who was the head of the church and supported Rasputin, belonged to that Khlest sect, a pagan essentially. Well, actually, Stolypin expelled Rasputin from St. Petersburg, and that was, the first step for the divorce with the emperor. Rasputin was brought back to St. Petersburg, and Stolypin was killed. So it's a tragic figure. So what then happened? Why did Russian liberalism gain in strength? And again, Peter the Great signed contracts with unorthodox Christian sects, and that was religious tolerance. As a result, the sects became the structure around which the Russian bourgeois monarchy evolved. Klichkov, Tretyakov, Malikov, Mamontov, Rябушинtsov, they were all old believers. They came to power. Liberals emerged in power. After the February Revolution, liberals came to power. Kerensky could be called a liberalist. But why did they lose? Interesting. Russian philosopher and author Fyodor Stepun is the name. Expressed these two ideas. I don't know which one to start with, but still, general one. First, general one. He said, what is liberal democracy? It is a projection of Christianity onto political life, where there's a right of an individual and there's equal relations between children of the same God. Well, Christianity, again, he said, is a projection, liberal democracy is projection of Christianity onto everyday life. That idea was supported by many Russian intellectuals. But why did they lose? Strange change happened then. Well, that the same author said they lost because liberals went away from Christianity. Well, he also thought that Russian people were Christian, innate in their souls. And there could be many quotes here that I can give from people who lived through the revolution. But Russian people were not innate Christian. They were kind of believers in two gods. On the one hand, they would go to church, but on the other hand, they would go to shamans. It was like two different departments, and they served both departments. When the revolution happened, that one of the departments became victorious and the other lost. I had an episode in my life together with my friend. We visited Russia, Central Russia. I looked at the churches, Orthodox churches, what happened to those, and asked them, who are ordered to destroy the church? Yeah. And it turned out, and we visited like 30 or 40 destroyed churches. And it was no order from the top to destroy the church. It's the people who destroyed the churches. Why so? Because Christianity is not an internal part of the Russian people. In that sense, we can, of course, blame Christianity, Orthodox Christianity. It is not as strong as the Catholic belief or Protestantism. Maybe Protestant religion is even stronger than Catholicism after the Lutheran, Calvinist movements, etc. In Russia, we didn't have that. But still, Orthodox Church worked. Recently, I visited Germany, a major religious political conference, and there was a person presenting him. I knew that person a little bit personally. In his presentation, showed how many dozens of thousands of Russian clergy were killed by the Bolshevik authorities. I had also a friend 20 years ago, Father Alexander Mein, you may know the name. He was the person who tried to restore real Orthodox belief. I asked him once, what's your attitude towards Catholicism? He said, Vladimir, understand. Well, we have partitions here, division lines here, but not at the level of God. That was a real believer. He had the power, he had the passion of a preacher, and people followed him. And of course, the authorities became frightened. And well, like there's a saying, no person, no problem. So he was killed. And again, my idea is simple. A problem. Well, liberal, creative things are important, of course. But we need an idea to change our people, because the problem is in the people. We don't have a real nation. We don't have the people to rely on. Neither peasants, neither the workers, nobody. Where are the peasants? Where are the farmers? We haven't got any. But the people are there. Physically, they are there, but we cannot rely on them. An important point here, and I'm not a politologist, I'm not a politician. What I'm saying here is just, well, what I think. Thomas Mann had that saying. When a mass of people is called a nation, the catastrophe is going to happen. But we have this mass of people, and we have to make them a nation. How can we do that? I don't really know. At some point in time, we had that opportunity. The Stolypin reform created that opportunity. What to do now? I don't know. Well, we have to make people work somehow. But you know what kind of people work here? It's immigrants from Central Asia, North Caucasus. Russian people, they tend to drink rather than work. And the final thing I want to address here, it is attitude of Europe towards Russia. Well, I'm a Russian European. I love Europe, etc., etc. But I think, and I agree with Khodorkovsky in this respect, he said had sanctions been against the Russian oligarchs and government, that would be one thing. But when I say the sanctions are against Russia, think of a mentality of a person living in a country. They would take it personally. The sanctions are against us. So I believe this mistake. The West does not understand. You cannot call these sanctions against Russia. Dear Europeans, you make a Russian nation get together supporting Putin because the sanctions are against them. Because while you're in a problem, you're on a boat, the boat is sinking, you ask the captain to help us out. And I believe Khodorkovsky is right in that the sanctions should not be called sanctions against Russia. And my final point. It's another example from the 20th century. Russia some time ago also was rocked like this, like a boat, and the Bolshevik revolution resulted. It's also a danger that we have right now, and the West should be aware of this. Don't rock the Russian boat. That would result in Europe getting into the same abyss that Russia is going to fall into. Remember, start of perestroika. What is Russia? What is Soviet Union? It's upper volta with nuclear missiles, right? If this country starts launching the missiles, it's not going to be a nice thing at all. Thank you.